it's going to be probably another card of the year candidate, right? There's just a great title fight. One guy who's deserved it for a long time, but just couldn't, find his way. But he's at that ripe age now where with the experience he has, you can't knock him. And then you got the guy who's on that one fight UFC knockout of Dan Hooker. We're going to get into those guys in real detail in a bit, but from top to bottom, man, I'm just so impressed with the UFC matchmaking at this point. I think that they truly are, let's just say, giving the fighters that they really want to see perform an opportunity to do that. And then the rest of these guys who can either bang real well or roll real well, wrestle real well, they're all getting good opportunities to kind of either showcase it against someone that's just as good or someone that they maybe should be beating to get to a much higher level in the UFC. And, it's fighting and it's promotion. So if that happens, you kind of got to roll with the punches. And like the veterans say, they're happy to be that gatekeeper that rolls these guys back down the hill to kind of climb up again. So let's get right into this first one. I'm a big fan of this first fight with Sean Soriano and Christos Giagos because you're talking about two guys in very similar positions, right? You had Soriano who went 0-3 in his original stint, but we're talking about guys like Chaz Skelly, Kawajiri, Charlie Rosa is going to be fighting Justin James in a couple in a short while here. So I'm really impressed with just the dog in him to just come back from things like that. He's got a CFFC fight against Mariscal that I thought he really showed off some of the grappling and cardio. That was a really fun fight to watch just from a technique perspective. And then I think what really got him that second opportunity in the UFC was that UAE Warriors knockout, right? Dana White was over there with Khabib and you saw kind of the episode of Looking for a Fight. And I'm really kind of impressed with what we saw in there because he's looking like the all-around fighter we expect. Now, we always talk about quality of opponents, things like that, but Soriano has been around the block, man. We're talking about UAE, CFFC, Legacy, and he's stepping in on he's stepping on a short notice for the first time in 6 years for Joel Alvarez. Now, when you think about the original matchmaking, Christos Giagos, Joel Alvarez, that's a beautiful striking battle. I think that would have been a really fun fight, but now here comes a gritty veteran with a second chance opportunity on short notice. These are kind of the guys as a storybook fan you might just want to watch and root for, right? I think he's got a good all-around game. He's shown that he's able to kind of really deal with high caliber, fighters in both the UFC and abroad, but this is where he's going to have to prove if he can really stay there. He went 6-3 as he left the UFC, and I think coming back with that kind of momentum on his back, and especially the experience, right? To go 0-3 in the UFC is obviously business as usual for them, and if you got to get cut and get some time on the regional scene, if not abroad, I think that's a great opportunity. Come back and showcase your skills. Now, let's flip over to my main man, Christos Giagos, because I'm a huge fan of his. I think that this is a guy that's finally getting his dues. I got an Instagram post about him, just a quick little touch on what he's kind of been through in his career, and he's an absolutely wonderful fighter because when you talk about having two stints in the UFC, I mean, this guy's first stint was against Gilbert Burns in terms of a debut fight, and then his second stint was against Charles Oliveira, who's now going to be fighting in the main event for the title. So you can kind of see where Giagos has gained a lot of experience. We talked about it. I'm going to touch on it with Priscilla Kucheta with Valentina Shevchenko, but these are the kind of fights where you lose, you're still learning a whole lot of stuff when it comes to the fight game and, what it feels like to be in there with the best of the best. And I think in his case, that's a huge edge he has going into this fight. Now, when you look at some of the tape, he gets a little tired. The Drakkar Klose fight, a couple of things he did real well. He neutralized those leg kicks. Klose has really, really powerful leg kicks. He's a great wrestler and he's got powerful hands, man. And the cardio is always there. So I think what really happened to him was, a great first round, and then slowly but surely Klose's will just, overshined, and it came, to the very much end of the second round, I felt, where the ground and pound was just getting very, very deadly. And in the third round, I mean, you can kind of see that Christos was trying to have a bit more success, but again, Klose has that ability to just push in. He can take a punch, and I think in this case, you kind of saw, at least in that moment, the better fighter for that fight to really come away with the victory, because you just saw Klose really, really turn it up. And like I said, the big takeaway for him there is, even though that's the most recent loss, neutralizing the leg kick, something that's becoming very popular. If he can do that in a fight against like Soriano and keep him at bay, he might have a really good advantage on the feet, but we know that there's power in Soriano's hands. So it's going to be interesting where this fight kind of lands up, gambling wise and line wise, because I'm not really 100% on that one. But From an all in all, I really, really like Giagos as just a fighter overall, regardless of who he's fighting. I think he's going to be really, really fun. We talked about the loss to Oliveira in his second stint, then he beats Hirota and Hadzovic, then he lost to Closey. So, he's having a bit more of a better run this time around in the UFC, and I think he's young enough to kind of showcase what he can do against, maybe not so much the title challenger type of fighters. And then, he went 2-1 in ACB, and funny enough, his only loss there was to Shamil Nakayev, who's now an undefeated fighter in Bellator. So just the little things to kind of take away from his game. We saw that the striking was pretty crisp against Close. I think that he switches stances very, very smoothly. And so when he's striking with that capability, I think that that's going to be something that, is going to cause Soriano some problems. And then we can talk about the Carlton Minus fight where he basically took that on 3 days notice. Yeah, 72 hours notice. And, I think on a full camp, he finishes that fight, man. He looked like the better fighter. I think Carlton Minus has a lot of heart. He was showing good grit in that fight, was trying to, get more active in the second and third rounds. But I think Giagos is proving to be a guy that is on the verge of those ranked fighters in that 10 to 15 range. I think he's a fun fighter that where if he can pull off enough of, a good string of victories, we're going to see him on a main card soon enough. I think that this was a fight where against Joel Alvarez, they had all the makings of just a really good slobber knocker, as Jim Ross used to say, to kind of take this card and just fly into the night sky with it. But I'm excited for it. From a betting perspective, I think that it's hard not to go against a guy like Giagos because, like I said, we're talking about Gilbert Burns on the first stint. Then he loses to Chris Wade, who's a PFL standout, and then Josh Emmett, who I believe is one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. It's just unfortunate with the injuries. We just don't get to see him enough. That Burgos fight, another fight we'll get into a little later, but that's one of the best fights of the pandemic you'll ever see. If you haven't checked that out, please go do that. But I think this is going to be one of the most underrated fights, and we're going to know why when Fight Night rolls around, because I think it's going to be one of those like he could finish, or it's just going to be a huge gritty war for 3 rounds. And going and looking at the lines, I mean, I'm not seeing much here, but it looks like Giagos open as a -220, and he's coming out, and Soriano's coming out a +180 dog. I'm not seeing much movement, pretty much the same, and I agree with those lines. In fact, if you're, like I said, a gambling man looking for a parlay ting, I mean, Christos Giagos is not someone you can sleep on. I think the experience speaks for itself. And if you're a guy that knows that durability and cardio are the only kind of real things that you maybe need to shape up to be able to kind of look your best in the second and third rounds, if you're taking damage early on, I think that's a great opportunity for him to improve on, especially with the full camp. So get excited for that fight. I think it's going to be absolutely phenomenal.